The 2024 Formula One Brazil Sao Paulo Grand Prix just finished up, and what a Sunday it was. Absolute chaos from the beginning of qualifying to the end of the race. We're here to go over every important moment that happened, starting with the qualifying, going through the entire race. If you just want to hear about the race, skip to the timestamp. And we're going to get started right away with Q1. There's a lot to go over, so let's go ahead and start with the very first lap. Lando goes out for the first time lap of Q1, and already yellow flags begin. Lando continued. Lawson almost hit the wall on his outlap, not able to start the car and braking. And there was hundreds of issues and lockups and going off and track limits over the weekend. 2 minutes later into Q1, another yellow flag for Guan Yu Zhou. They continue still. Both Zhou and Lawson couldn't stop into turn 12, as well as Stroll right after. That was the main sticking point in the beginning of these sessions, was that turn 12 area. Everyone got a lap on the board with about 12 minutes left of Q1, except for Hamilton and Stroll, whose times got deleted. Ocon sets fastest lap with about 11 minutes left, and pretty much once a minute somebody was going off around the track. So every single run somebody was coming through, it was yellow flags constantly going on and off. Max sets a pretty good lap in the middle of Q1 behind Stroll. Behind Stroll, and then Perez takes fastest sector one and sets a P2 lap. So Max was struggling earlier in the weekend. Obviously that didn't continue for the rest of the weekend. Tsunoda came through in Q1 to take P1 momentarily. Red flag comes out with 8 minutes and 50 seconds left for Franco Colapinto, who lost the car around turn 2, turn 3, didn't have any grip and couldn't get the power down and spun out, lost it. Red flag came out. Q1 continued, and lap times were still pretty similar to before the red flag. Russell couldn't slow down into turn 1 and then comes back on and rejoins and kind of impedes Albon a little bit. Max goes ahead of Perez finally with 2 minutes left, and Ocon sets another fast lap time for P2. Hulkenberg goes off course and cuts some grass, does a little landscaping. Less than 2 minutes left. Hamilton's in the drop zone on his final run, and it puts through a lap with about a minute left that wasn't nearly close enough to get him out of the drop zone. Luckily, with the wet running, it's not like a soft tire run where you can only get one try, really. They could just run right into another fast lap. So he pushed on again. Verstappen's time got eliminated for track limits his last lap, but he was P12 at the time. Hamilton, on his final lap after the checkered flag, squeaks into 14th, sends Norris into the P16 drop zone. Lando on his fastest lap barely does enough to get up to 14th. Lawson comes through ahead of him and drops him down to 15th, but fortunately for Lando, that was the last one to come through, and he made it through into Q2 in P15. So Verstappen ends up taking the fastest lap in Q1, about 5/10 up on his last run, and Lando finishes down in 15th. The final grid coming out of Q1 is Verstappen, Albon, Russell, Ocon, Tsunoda, Gasly, Leclerc, Perez, Piastri, Alonso, Sainz, Stroll, Bottas, Lawson, Norris, and then your eliminations are Hamilton, Behrman, Colapinto, Hulkenberg, and of course, Guan Yu Zhou. So not a great weekend again for Hamilton. He was complaining constantly about the ride quality. Meanwhile, Russell was just chilling up in the top of the times most of the sessions, so that's pretty typical. But anyway, moving on to Q2, Piastri starts as the only one on inters. Everybody else is on the X-Wets. I imagined at the time it was just to get info for Norris, and that's exactly what they were doing. So most of the track still on full wet tires, as there's only some very small dry patches in this late second sector into early third sector. Piastri goes P3 on inters behind Perez and Alonso. Behind Perez and Alonso, Max comes through on full wets and sets the fastest lap. So Max did set the fastest lap on wets right off the bat, but the inters obviously at this point were going to be better for the rest of the session, as they needed a little bit to warm up, and Piastri came through on a second lap, setting the fastest lap and a fastest sector one, and finishing by 6/10 over Max on that second lap on the inters. So it was clear at that point, with about 8 minutes left, everybody was going to have to pit, and that's what everybody did. So Russell spins out around the same time, 8 minutes left, keeps it going, a little bit of a yellow flag, and right after this, with about 6 minutes left in the session, Carlos Sainz hits the wall, ending his qualifying. He had a really weird spin coming out of turn 1. A lot of people were having this weekend. Some of the stuff was pretty easy to see what happened, but Sainz had a weird one. He was done. Lando was the first one out for the restart, as he was in the drop zone in P11th, and he comes out and sets a P3 lap with Yuki following behind in P4 and Albon following him behind and takes P5. Alonso comes through and takes P1 in Q2, and with under 2 minutes left, the yellow flag comes out for Lance, the window licker, wrecking his shit, while Max was in the middle of his push lap, bringing out the red flag with about about 2 minutes left and ending the Q2 session. So Max and Checo both left out to dry in Q2. They did not get their final push laps in, and they ended up in the drop zone. I guess you have to blame Red Bull for not sending them out earlier in Q2, knowing that we had these issues all weekend and it was rainy and not great. And if Stroll's still on the track, he's just a ticking time bomb, especially in the rain. So your Q2 elims are Bottas, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, and Gasly, while somehow the window licker makes it in, even though he binned the shit. So your final grid coming out of Q2, Norris, Alonso, Piastri, Lawson, Albon, Leclerc, Ocon, Tsunoda, Russell, and Stroll in 10th. Going into Q3, they all came out on inters while the rain continued. Norris sets a solid first benchmark time, but Ocon actually takes P1 on his second run, with Piastri struggling on the first run, but coming through on the second run to take P1 from Ocon temporarily. Albon came through and took P1 right after, and Norris came through after again and took P1 back. So the track seemed to be speeding up at this point in Q3, and it was a constant battle for these top spots. Alonso, with about 7 minutes left in Q3, crashed out, brought out the red flag, and now both Aston Martins were trashed in this Q3 session that took place Sunday morning, just 5 hours before the race. So the mechanics had their work cut out for them, okay? They were going to be on a time crunch a little bit, all right? Session resumes. Russell is the first one out, followed by Norris. It seems like the rain may have stopped at this moment when they restart. Russell goes off turn 4 on his restart push lap with about 4 minutes left. The yellow flag came out in sector 2. Yuki brought it out, spun, came back on, continued, no big deal. Another red flag with about 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. Albon hit the barriers while he was P2 in the session and absolutely mangled his car, and that would do it for him for the rest of the weekend. He could not participate in the race because of this crash. We saw a lot of bad accidents, specifically Stroll too. His had quite a bit of damage, and I thought there was no way that they'd be able to repair his car in time, but they proved me wrong, and they obviously do really quick work. But anyway, Albon brings out the red flag with about 3 minutes 30 left. Norris was about 5/10 up on the field at this point. Both Williams, both Aston Martins are wrecked. They restart, and Lando improved his fastest lap again. Nobody else looked close until the very final laps, and both RBs were setting great Sector 1s and Sector 2s. Lawson comes through first, takes P2. Yuki comes through right after him, kicks him out of P2, takes that spot, and barely misses out on Lando at that point by less than 200ths, until Lando sets his final lap, sets a time 7/10 ahead of Yuki and just 0.17 ahead of Russell, who comes through on his final run of Q3 to take P2. That was the conclusion of the qualifying. So here's your final qualifying grid. Norris takes pole position in first place. George Russell in second. Yuki Tsunoda, his best outing and maybe ever, takes third place. Esteban Ocon, I don't know how, in fourth place. Lawson fifth. Charles Leclerc sixth. Albon 7. Piastri 8. Alonso 9. Stroll 10. Valtteri Bottas 11. Max Verstappen 12th, but going to have a 5-place grid penalty. Sergio Perez 13. Carlos Sainz 14. Gasly 15. Hamilton 16, Ollie Behrman 17, Franco Colapinto 18, Hulk 19, and the perennial backmarker Guan Yu Zhou 20. Okay. So moving on to the starting grid, obviously because of the crashes and the penalty for Verstappen, the starting grid was a little bit altered. So we have Max starting here down in 17th. We have Carlos Sainz, a pit lane start from 20th, and that moves Pierre Gasly up to 13th as well. So he started from 13th. Esteban Ocon from 4th, and we will see how they do in the race. I'll give you a little foreshadowing. All right, so moving on to the race, let's get started with the very first lap. So before we even get to the first lap, all right, before we even go into that, fortunately for Aston Martin, they have really good mechanics, and they got Lance Stroll's car fixed. Unfortunately for them, it was Lance Stroll's car, and he was the one driving. So this dude crashed on the fucking formation lap, completely destroyed his shit, ended his race on the formation lap, and this led to a cascade of just fuckery that happened in this race. So they had to do so they came on at the end of the formation lap towards the end, obviously, is when they brought out the I guess it was a safety car, or they just stopped it. I'm not really sure what they actually brought out technically, but they came back around and got set on the grid. And from what it seemed like on the broadcast, there was yellow lights, and they weren't going to they aborted the start, obviously, but it seemed like they were just going to sit there and wait until they maybe cleaned up the wreck. And instead, Lando decided to go again for another formation lap, even though, again, supposedly it didn't. On the broadcast, they said that there wasn't any indication or sign that said that he should go for another formation lap. So he got noted for that by race control. We never actually heard by the end of the broadcast what ended up happening with that. I'd imagine they don't do anything because it's Lando Norris. But anyway, yeah, that kind of started a cascade of weird stuff and broken procedures. And what ended up happening was they went around for the second formation lap, even though they weren't supposed to. And then they called the red flag. Everybody came in to the pit lane, and we waited for another restart. So they finally get Stroll's car off track, abort the start. A bunch of stuff starts fucking happening. They have to restart every procedure now. So they do a 10-minute timer and restart everything as if they were about to start the race again on the grid. And instead they were in the pit lane. So they were gonna go from pit lane, do a rolling start, and we had to wait 10 minutes for that. A complete clusterfuck, all Lance Stroll's fault as usual. So finally, everyone makes it to the grid in one piece. The rain starts to pick up. They restart the race, and it's obviously Lando in first, Russell in second. Russell takes him very easily into turn one. Not sure what we're doing there, Lando. I mean, pretty typical bottling from Norris, but he blows it into turn one. Russell gets past. Oscar and Alonso battled early. Yuki hangs on to third, so that was the big thing going out of that first turn one as well. Oscar and Alonso were battling. Piastri did get ahead. Verstappen up next to Hamilton towards the middle of the lap, already up in 11th place. He took turn three on the outside of everybody and must have gotten by 3 or 4 people just on taking the wide line of turn three into turn four. So he made up 6 or 7 spots, I believe, on the first lap, 7 spots on the first lap. Pretty unbelievable in the rain. Checo spins out in sector 2 on the first lap and drops to last place. Again, pretty typical. Ocon hangs on to P4 for lap 1. Max passes Hamilton into turn 1 on lap 2 and takes P10 already. Lando already 2 seconds behind Russell, middle of lap 2. The rain's coming down heavy in sector 3 by lap 3, with the whole grid still on inters at this point. Lando takes fastest lap, lap 3, and closes the gap to 1.5 seconds, and another fastest lap to bring the gap into under 2 seconds. Max passed Gasly into turn 1, lap 5, takes P9, and gets past Alonso on the next lap into P8 as well. So he was making quick work up the field. Max takes the fastest lap on lap 6 and has Piastri next in front of him a couple seconds up the road. His lap 6 was almost 7/10 faster than Lando ahead. Lap 9, Behrman gets hit with a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Colapinto. Kind of a weird one, probably shouldn't have been. Because Colapinto just kind of continued, didn't lose any time from it, and that's the argument Behrman made as well, is that he took the brunt of it. He dropped down a couple of spots from it. Nothing really happened to Colapinto. So weird 10-second penalty, but he ended up finishing towards the bottom anyway, so it didn't really matter. Max attacks Piastri into turn 1 and gets by easy on lap 10 into P7 with Lawson next ahead in front, and obviously he wouldn't give him much of an issue. Lap 11, Max is up Lawson's ass, and he gets by mid-lap 11 with Leclerc over 2 seconds ahead as his next victim. Hamilton goes off the road, lap 11, cuts some grass, does a little landscaping. Ocon stays close behind Yuki with another 6-second gap behind him, ahead of Yuki in the top 2. Lap 14, Norris 0.4 seconds faster than Max, and the gap between them now is around 10 seconds. Yuki got Ocon out of DRS by lap 15, and Ocon, Leclerc, and Max were all bunched up at this point, fighting for 4th place. Lap 20, Hamilton almost kills Behrman, trying to overtake into turn 1, and Behrman still gets by, because Hamilton's absolutely washed and just wanted to bitch today instead of actually race. Hamilton saying the car at this point is not drivable, locking up, bouncing everywhere, usual bullshit, while Russell's in P1. Just absolute cope. Lap 21, Lando gap to Russell is 1.7, and Max is closing on Leclerc, and he defends Max into turn 1, lap 22. Really the only one to try to put any kind of defense on Max into turn 1 in this race. Max had a moment into turn 11 and dropped back a bit from Leclerc, so he didn't have to defend into turn 1 on lap 23. Lap 24, though, Lando under 1 second to Russell, and Yuki really holding up the pack behind with 11 seconds behind Russell. Rain picking up as we get to lap 25. Leclerc pits, and that was essentially his race. Max moves up to P5. Lap 26, Russell and Norris decide to still stay out. The rain is picking up at this point. Lando wants the box, saying it's raining too much, but they tell him to stay out, which was a good idea. Also, lap 26, Oscar kills Lawson into turn 1, gets a 10-second penalty, way too late of a lunge for him into turn 1, and absolutely nails the side of Lawson. A little Aussie violence. Yeah, just a bad move from him there. Just doing a little bit too much, being a little bit too desperate. Lap 27, Hulkenberg spins out, couldn't get back onto the circuit. And as the marshals are like on his car, I guess they gave him a push or something. He fires his car back up, goes back out in the middle of the safety car, and they call back in the safety car right as Lando pits. So the the pit window kind of opens under this VSC, and everybody's thinking about pitting already. Red Bull pitched Checo first, puts him on full watts, and at this point, Hulk randomly resets his car, starts going again, brings in the virtual safety car at the same time that Lando is boxing. Horrible timing, and again, cost him his race, just like it cost Leclerc when they pit him back then as well. Ocon inherits the lead here, and Max moves up to second and 6 seconds back from the lead. Terrible stuff, terrible strategy from McLaren bringing him in there to pit. Cost him the race, cost him the points, and probably cost him his chance at the Drivers' Championship, as we're going to see at the end of this race here. So, lap 30, Lando passes Russell to get P4. Safety car deployed on this lap 30 with Ocon in the lead and Max behind 8 seconds at the time they stopped. At this point, Max tried to attack Ocon on the restart, but couldn't get by the first time as Ocon had a really good start. And instantly, Esteban started putting pace on and started building a gap. And it seemed like the clear air out front, specifically today in this rain, gave such a big pace advantage, as we'll see a little bit later in the race here. But he did start putting quite a big gap on Max. And if there was nothing else to happen for the rest of the race, he would have won the race. So that neutralized Lando's pit stop with the safety car there. Really unlucky. Lucky he got past Russell before the safety car, but really unlucky timing for the pit stop. Hamilton and Lawson go wheel to wheel in turn one, bang wheels a bit. Definitely Lawson's fault here. Again, just some of these guys just being a little bit desperate, and Hamilton just having a rough time, just not being able to have a smooth ride. Lap 31, under safety car. F1 Graphics says full track is X wets, and most of the grid is still in inters at this point. So tricky. The inters are much faster and more durable over the distance, but it seemed like the rain at this point was too much. Lap 32, Colapinto crashes under the safety car in the middle of the track, bringing out another red flag and another stoppage. So he completely binned it on like one of the last corners before the main straight, and his car was just in the middle of the track, dumping out a bunch of fluids and whatnot. So they had to clean all of that up. Lap 33, we finally have a rolling restart. On the restart, as Ocon's about to set up the restart, Behrman's spinning out in the sector 3 in the back of the track. Perez gets a pretty good start, gets up to P12 on the restart. Norris spins off on the first lap, loses a position back to Russell. Leclerc goes off after him shortly after, but maintains his spot. Lap 35, Hamilton gets by Alonso into turn 1 to get up into P9. Ocon immediately out front, setting the pace and building a gap to Max, 3 seconds in just 2 laps. Lap 36, Behrman spins out, hits the wall, and he does get going again, but did a little bit of damage in the process. 3 laps later, lap 39, Carlos Sainz slides out, nails the wall around turn 8, another safety car, and his race is over at this point. And it took a couple laps for the safety car. So lap 43, we came out, safety car restart. Max takes Ocon down inside turn 1, easy money. Not too much of a fight here. And Lando goes off in those first couple of turns as well and drops down to P7. So as Max takes the lead, Lando drops down even farther. And all this started with just a bad timing for a pit stop. So really rough day for them and probably going to cost him the shot at the championship. But Lawson double overtakes Hamilton and Alonso in the same turn. They both have bits of mistakes. He gets by them both. Alonso goes off the same lap in sector 3, cuts some grass. Max up to 1.5 second gap after this restart. Lap 46, the lead is up to 3 seconds. Lando gets ahead of Piastri on the team orders swap. Probably wouldn't have otherwise. Russell gets past Leclerc after an error, and Norris close behind in P6. Lap 48. So starting from lap 48 until the end of the race, it's pretty much just a Max Verstappen fastest lap simulator. So lap 48, Max sets another fastest lap, 3.8 seconds ahead of Ocon, and Russell in P4 is still 3 seconds behind the double Alpine podium, which is just unbelievable. Nobody would have expected that. Lap 49, fastest lap, gap is up to 4.5. Lap 50, same thing, gap 5.1. Lap 51, fastest lap, 5.7. On this lap, Piastri goes off and drops down to P8, barely fends off Lawson behind and falls behind Yuki, I believe, at that time. Lap 55, Perez attacks Lawson into turn 1. They go wheel to wheel. Perez can't get by. Washed. Hamilton takes advantage of this and gets by Perez right after in the bump fight in the back. So here we go again. Lap 57, Max fastest lap, 8.8 gap. Lap 59, fastest lap again, 10-second gap. 2 laps later, lap 61, another fastest lap, 11.4. 2 laps later, another one, 13.4 second gap. 2 laps later, another one, 14.8 second gap. Next lap, and with 3 laps to go, so there's 69 laps in this race. After the botch start, they had to take a couple of laps off. Lap 66, again, a fastest lap and a 15.6 gap now to Ocon behind. Checo tries to attack Hamilton inside turn 4, but can't get past. Lap 68, the penultimate lap, fastest again for Verstappen, 18-second gap. Checo tries again, turn 1, not close enough. Max ends up winning just under 20 seconds and a double Alpine podium behind him. What a fucking race. Absolutely mental, mate. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Verstappen from 17th in first. Gasly from 13th into third. And Ocon from, what, 4th or 5th into second. A double Alpine podium. And Verstappen from 17th. Gotta take a breath after that one. What a weekend, man. What a weekend. The sprint race was highly contested. We had some dry running in the sprint. No qualifying last night. They have to push it till this morning. And we have, Norris almost get knocked out in the first 2 sessions. Verstappen does fall out in the second section because of Lance Stroll licking windows. And then Norris ends up taking pole, but finishing up in oh God, where was he? P5, P6. So here we go. We'll look at the final grid here in P6. So your final finishing for the Sao Paulo Brazil Grand Prix, Max Verstappen takes the win and 26 points along with it to put 18 points on the gap to Lando Norris, and that'll do it, folks. That'll pretty much fucking do it. Max could take grid penalties for probably the rest of the year and still not be enough. That'll seal the deal, man. With 3 races remaining, I think that's about it. I'd love to see Norris come back the next 2 races and it come down to Abu Dhabi. That'd be awesome, but I think that'll just about do it, man. I think we saw today why Max is going to win this championship, and in our wettest race of the year against all the odds in 17th place, he ends up coming through again somehow to win the race. Unbelievable race, though. 10 out of 10 for sure. Today specifically, because they had the qualifying and the race, easy 10 out of 10. Probably the best single day of F1 of the season so far. And just an unbelievable result. So the final grid, Max Verstappen takes the win. Esteban Ocon, second place, and Pierre Gasly in third. The double Alpine podium that everybody predicted today. George Russell comes through in fourth place. Pretty good drive for him. Charles Leclerc, fifth place. Lando Norris in sixth. Too many errors, man. Strategical error, and then he made a couple errors on track. Yuki Tsunoda in 7th place. Oscar Piastri down in 8th. Also made some errors. Lawson does get 2 points, down in 9th. Lewis Hamilton gets the last point of the race in 10th. Perez outside the points as usual in 11th. Ollie Behrman in 12th. Not a bad day for him, but he did get a penalty, I believe, as well, which he might have stayed. He might have been in the points if he didn't, but tough day for him. Valtteri Bottas in 13th. Valtteri Bottas 13th, Fernando Alonso 14th, and Guan Yu Zhou, against all odds, regardless of what happens in the race. I don't care how many people go off. Guan Yu Zhou comes in, the last finisher of the race. And your non-finishers, your DNFs, Carlos Sainz, Franco Colapinto, Nico Hulkenberg, Alex Albon, and of course, before the race even got started, Lance the Nepo baby Stroll. So that'll do it, man. That'll just about do it in the standings here. Let's take another look now. 393 to 331. That is a 62-point gap now, and that's going to do it, folks. That's going to do it. I know strategically that's not going to do it, but that's going to fucking do it. Max Verstappen 4 times in a row will be World Drivers' Champion unless the car stops working for 3 races in a row. That'll do it. And even besides that now, Alpine goes from second to last, barely any points, up to 6th place in the constructors. Not only did they get a double podium, they earned themselves tens of millions of dollars in money for this spot in the constructors. Now, are they going to keep it? They're probably going to end up dropping to 8th, but they have a chance now to stay ahead of Haas and RB. I don't think they will in the last 3 races, but it's possible, man. They're fighting for points. Big for RB that Lawson got the couple of points, and Yuki, but yeah, dude. Or sorry, Yuki didn't get any. No, did he get points? Where is he? He did, right? He finished 7th. Yeah, so they ended up getting 8 points today too. So pretty good day for them, but not when they're getting that much, man. Um, God, dude, I don't know. I'm about to sit on this one for a little bit and probably come back and do another stream or video about it because this was just a ridiculous weekend. I might just do a full video breaking down Max Verstappen's drive, specifically the first couple of laps, because Yeah, just really put on a masterclass today. And after qualifying, you knew it was either going to be a really bad day or a really good day for him. And it ended up that McLaren fell, making the wrong strategical decision, and then Max picked up the pieces and was able to do what champions do, and end up getting the win. So, God, can't enough can't be said about this race. I mean, really good weekend all around. I love that we had the dry weather running and then the wet racing because the wet is always just you never know what's going to happen. Um, yeah, that's going to do it. I'll probably be back with more content about this. We're going to have to talk about it more because it was a crazy weekend, but that's going to do it for now. We'll get this recap out, and I'll be back with more this week. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe. I'll be back with more F1 content. Peace.